First thing you want is a stool or chair that's about the same height as the wheel. So you also want to get yourself sitting up as close to the wheel as possible. You don't want to be way back here. Okay, so set up close. And then the foot pedal, you can choose which foot you want to have operate the foot pedal, either your right foot or your left foot. That's just a personal preference. I learned with my right foot, so that's what I'm going to be using. And if you have a wheel head that has bat pins already attached, you're going to want to use a bat. So I've got a masonite bat here. I'm going to put on the wheel head and secure with the bat pins. A couple of the tools that you want to have handy: your needle tool, a throwing sponge, a wooden knife, wire tool, a metal rib, and your wooden rib. You also are going to need a bucket of water, and it's good to have a large size bucket. You don't want to go overboard and get like a 5-gallon bucket, but something this size, a 1 gallon, and get it full of water. Especially when you're starting out, you need a little bit more water. All right, the last thing you're going to want to have is some clay prepared. And to start, it's a good idea to have something that is about 1.5 to 2 pounds of clay. So I've just used a kitchen scale and weighed this out into 1.5 pound balls. And it's also nice to paddle the clay into a ball shape before you start. So now you're ready to get started with the actual throwing process. So depending on the wheel that you have, some of the wheels will go in both counterclockwise rotation and clockwise rotations. If you are left-handed and you have the option of switching the rotation on your wheel, then you could use a clockwise rotation. So in this wheel, you can switch the rotation. So clockwise for left-handed. And then if you are a left-handed thrower, all of the throwing is going to happen in the quadrant between 9 o'clock and 6 o'clock if you're thinking about the wheel as a clock face. Okay, so it's going to be happening over here. If you're right-handed, you're going to want your wheel to go in a counterclockwise rotation, so this way. And all of your throwing and everything is going to happen in this quadrant here between 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock if you're looking at your wheel like a clock face. All right, so once you got your wheel spinning in the right direction, you've got your clay ready, your tools, your water, then you're ready to go. When you apply your clay to the wheel, you don't want to add water yet because the water will make your clay just slip right off. So instead, you're just going to want to use some force, try to get it as close to center as possible. The nice thing about using a wheel head without bat pins is you have these concentric circles. So you could take these bat pins out, use the concentric circles to get you as close to center as possible. So there, for instance. Or you could take a marker and draw circles on your bat. If you're throwing on a wheel that has bat pins, but you want to use the wheel head, make sure that you remove the bat pins before you start throwing, because if not, you could really hurt yourself. These will come around pretty quick and they could cut your hand pretty bad. When you're ready to start, you're going to take your ball of clay and you're going to get it as close to center as possible. But sometimes this might happen and it gets really off center. Don't worry about it, just lift it back up. But after you lift it up, you want to make sure that this surface is rounded again. So paddle it back into a round. And the reason why is if you just picked it up and put it down again, you could trap air underneath that flat side. So make sure you round it again and then get it closer to center the second time. And then still no water involved. You're going to spin the wheel at a pretty slow rotation. And you're going to take your 2 hands and you're going to paddle the clay ball like this. So you're going down at a 45-degree angle. Not in like this, but down towards the wheel head and in at the same time. So I'm approaching it from 3 o'clock on this side, from 9 o'clock on this side, and I'm just paddling it and getting it a little more centered to start, so I make my job a little bit easier. All right, once I got it paddled, it should resemble a cone shape like this. Now I'm ready to center the clay. And when you start centering, you need to have water. Okay. So I'm just going to get a little bit of water on there, get water on my hands. Spin the wheel at a fast speed. Make sure my elbows are locked on my knees. Make sure I'm as close to the wheel head as possible. And I'm going to come in from both sides, and I'm going to be contacting the clay right here at the pads of my hands and my fingertips. And I'm just coming in from both sides, and I'm squeezing the clay up. Okay, make sure your elbows are locked. Your chicken wings aren't out like this. Your elbows need to be locked in order for this to work. Okay. Once I got it squeezed up, then I need to bring this clay back down. And to do that, I'm going to take my left hand and I'm going to be contacting the clay right here on this pad. And my right hand is going to be my karate chopping hand. I'm going to go straight down right here, the clay. This is my contact point. Okay, notice my two hands are touching, very important. Notice too that my left hand is up high along with my right hand, and they're acting together. So my karate chopping hand is pressing down. This hand is pressing away from me. Pressure is equal from the side and the top. And my goal is to get the sides even and the top flat. Okay, let your hands off slowly. If you let your hands off too fast, you'll knock your piece off center. If you're not happy with the way that it's centered, it's still a little bit off center perhaps, you can always do this motion again. Again, the contact point is going to be here on both pads, here, my fingertips, and my elbows are locked in. Some things that could possibly happen is if you're lifting up like this, you're going to create a hole in the middle of your clay like that, which is bad because you could close this in as you push back down, create a large air pocket, and it's going to make it really hard to work with. So to avoid that hole happening, it's all in the way that you apply pressure to this ball here. All right, so my pressure is not going to be lifting like this, but rather it's going to be pressing down and in like this. All right, so down and in will lift the center up. All right. And then again, to bring this back down, to make that tuna can kind of shape that we're looking for, pressure right here from this hand, here from this hand, both hands touching, working together. Wheel speed is fast, pressure is consistent, back down. Tuna can. All right, after you have your piece centered, the next step is to drop the hole. And to do that, you can use fingertips if you like. Many people just starting out like to use their thumbs. So grab both sides of your tuna can, both thumbs together, find the center point, and press down. You'll notice I'm not pressing down like this. I'm coming at an angle. So I'm making a concave kind of bowl shape. All right, now we want to judge the thickness of our bottom. Since we're throwing a cylinder, we want to try not to have to trim out a whole bunch out of the bottom of our cylinder. So we're looking for about 1/4 of an inch at the bottom. To determine or to measure that thickness, you're going to use your needle tool and you're going to stick it right down in the center of the bottom. Then you're going to take your fingertip, put your fingertip in the bottom there and hold it. Then lift the needle tool and your fingertip up together. So right now I'm at about 1/4 of an inch. That's perfect. I know I don't want to drop my hole any further. And I'm ready then to open this hole up. So to open it up, I like to use my fingers on this side, and then my left hand is kind of passively hugging the wall of the clay here on this side. So what this is looking like in the inside of here is, imagine my hand here is the base of my cylinder on the inside. I'm going to be pulling, kind of hooking my hand a little bit and pulling straight towards me at 6 o'clock on my wheel head. So I'm going to be pulling straight towards me like this. Okay, this hand again is kind of passively holding on to the outside. Both hands are always touching each other. And then I'm opening this up. It's about 3 inches in the inner diameter. That's pretty much what I'm going for. What I want to make sure I don't do is open this inner diameter any wider than this outer diameter here. So here we have, let's say 5 inches, let's just say it's 5. In here I've got 3 then, so I have about an inch down here on either side. It's going to look like an inch at the top no matter how open you pull this. So make sure you're looking at the base of your clay and not the top rim of your clay. All right, so now that I've opened that up, I need to compress the floor. Compression is key to avoid things called S-cracks, which can happen later. So to compress it, I'll take my sponge and my fingers. You could just use your fingers. And I'm going to be doing a motion that's moving from 3 o'clock on the outer edge in towards the center, back out to 3 o'clock, in towards the center, pressing down as I move my hand. Again, wheel speed is medium fast, fast, just compressing that floor in. Okay, so now I'm going to cut this in half for you so you can see what it looks like after you've dropped the hole and opened it up. So again, you have that 1/4 of an inch at the bottom. You have 90-degree angle at the sides, or you have your corners established, and your clay is very thick on the walls. This is the clay, this thickness of clay here is what you're going to create the height of your cylinder out of. So once you've got this opened up, now you're ready to lift the clay up and form the walls of the cylinder. Now to do that, if you're right-handed and your wheel is moving counterclockwise, you're going to be working between 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock on your wheel head, so in this quadrant here. And the reason why is because you need to have one of your arms, one of your chicken wings needs to be locked in. And so if you're working in this quadrant here, you wouldn't be able to have that elbow locked in at your side. If you're working over on this side here, you have all the clay coming at your fingertips, and what can happen is the clay can catch your fingertips and your whole hand and arm will get sucked into the clay. So you want to make sure that the clay's moving through your fingertips this way and not coming at your fingertips this way. All right. Now people use a bunch of different techniques for pulling, and I encourage you to try a bunch of different ways and find the way that works best for you. I know people that use fingertips like this. Some people like a bent knuckle on the outside, fingertips on the inside. Some people like to do the fingertip thing but have a sponge involved, so the sponge would be here on the outside. The advantage to using a sponge is that your fingers don't tend to move around so much when you're first learning. The disadvantage, however, is that you can't really feel the wall thickness. So if you do like to pull with a sponge, I encourage you to try to do your last pull with just your fingertips so that you can really feel the thickness of the clay walls. Another technique that people use is they'll use either one hand in the back like this with the thumb pushing against the fingertips and kind of lifting the clay up and away, so towards 12 o'clock on the wheel head. Some people also like doing that with 2 hands, so 2 thumbs in the back and then pulling up and away towards 12 o'clock. Because your clay is thick, your first pull is really important. It's also the pull where you can apply more pressure. So what this looks like, I've got my fingertips on the outside, my fingertips on the inside, both hands touching, and the outside fingers are going to squeeze with the inside fingers, and I'm going to lift this wall up. So the goal with the first pull is to make a form that's conical or volcano shape. As soon as you start going straight up and down or even coming out like this, you're going to lose control of the form, especially of the cylinder. It's hard to come back in because of the wheel's centrifugal force. So if you can battle that from the very beginning and learn how to go against that force and create a volcano shape, you're going to be better off. You'll also notice that as I pulled up the side, I stopped just shy of the rim, but I made sure that my rim had thinned out a good bit, so it's not a really thick rim. If I had stopped too short, so say I stopped way down here, my rim would still be really thick, and the next pull I'll probably rip that rim off. So I want to make sure that my rim is starting to thin out even with that very first pull. So after your first pull, you should have your floor established, so you have that 1/4 inch down here. You also will see that the wall is still a 90-degree angle down at the very bottom. So this hasn't come in at all and created more of a bowl shape. That's telling me that my inside hand remains stable as my outside hand was applying pressure. You also notice that it's still considerably thick down here, but it does start thinning out towards the rim. These are all kind of essential components of that first pull. And finally, you'll notice that it goes into a volcano shape, also essential for the first pull. All right, so once you got your first pull down, you're ready for your second pull. And the initial motion is the same, where you have your hand on the inside, your fingertip, so in this case my middle finger, because it's the longest, is going to be down and setting in that 90-degree angle corner. Okay, my outside fingertip, my middle finger again, is going to be pressing down and in at a 45-degree angle while this inside hand is rigid. And I'm going to be creating a little groove, okay? And then what you'll see happen is I'm going to be lifting, so I'm pinching between both fingers. Notice too how my hands are always touching if they can. As soon as my hands can touch, they will touch, so that my hands lift up the side together. I'm going to get a little bit of water here so that my hands move freely up the side as I lift. Notice my wheel speed is like a medium speed. It could be slower. And you'll notice too, as I lift up, you'll see that my finger marks, I'm lifting up relatively slowly, so that my finger marks are kind of the rings that you see are really close together. If you go up the side of your piece too fast, you're going to create a deep spiral, and you'll have thin and thick spots all the way up your clay wall. So you want to make sure that you go up at a consistent kind of slow speed so that you can see these little rings really close together. So as I lifted to the rim, I then want to compress my rim, and to do that with my left hand, I'm going to be pinching between my middle finger and my thumb, and my right hand is going to form kind of an H, and it's just going to press straight down. So pinching in a little bit here, pressing down a little bit here. Because this is so thin, this clay up here, I'm not applying a lot of pressure. I just want to compress the rim. And what this does is this avoids cracks that come from the rim and go down here later on in the process. And I'm going to cut this one in half so you can see what it looks like on the inside. So with this one, again, you have that 1/4 inch at the base, but it's still pretty thick on the sides, but it's getting taller and it's getting thinner. The walls are getting taller and thinner. You'll also notice that it still is wider here and narrower here, so you're still creating that volcano shape, and you have that nice 90-degree angle down at the base. And your interior diameter has stayed the same. It hasn't narrowed at all, so it's not turning into a bowl shape. All right, so after you've got your second pull, you're ready to do your third pull. You'll notice that this form is still wider at the base, narrower at the top. When I get my hand down inside here now, you'll notice that my thumb might not be able to touch this outside hand easily. So I'm just going to wait until it can touch, and then this outside hand will help lift that inside hand up. So don't be afraid if your hands can't touch at the very beginning. Just as soon as they're able to touch each other, you should have them work together. So I'm going to take my sponge and squeeze some water so that I get water on the outside surface and the inside surface. My inside fingertips are rigid down there at the bottom. My outside, my middle finger, is going to be pressing down and in at a 45-degree angle, making that little groove. So if I was to cut this in half right now, what you'd see is you'd see my inside finger, this middle finger, resting inside this coil right here. So I'll show you what this looks like in cross section. So in a cross section, this is what it looks like, okay? My outside fingertips are underneath my inside fingertips, like this. And then when I'm ready to lift the wall, I'm just lifting it like this. Okay. All right, so I'm squeezing it, lifting. Now the higher up the wall I get, I'm going to ease up on my pressure slightly because the clay gets thinner and thinner and thinner the higher up I go. My two hands are touching now. I'm going to work up to the rim, stop just shy of the rim so I can compress it. Now there's ways to change the shape of the rim. So if I do the H like this, I'm creating a flat rim. But I could, if I wanted a rounded rim, take my sponge and bend it over the rim as I pinch with this hand. So bending it over like this with this hand as I'm pinching with that hand. So there's the third pull. And you'll notice with this pull, it still is coming in a little bit at the top. Now, it's a good idea to try to strive for 3 pulls to get the height of your cylinder. And then after the 3 pulls, you can do some shaping with some ribs, which I'll get to in a minute. But ideally, you want to try to get your clay up in 3 pulls if you can, or you want to strive for that. And the reason why is the more pulls you make on your cylinder, the weaker the clay becomes. There's more chance for error, those kinds of things. So one tip one of my former instructors gave us was to use 2 pounds of clay, try to get 10 inches out of 3 pulls. And that's kind of a good thing to try to achieve. All right, so cut this one in half. All right, so third pull. So here, after the third pull, you can see that the thickness of the bottom is about 1/4 inch, and so is the wall all the way up from the floor all the way to the bottom. You have a pretty even thickness.